Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking weapons. And note, when I say weapons, obviously I am not talking about the most powerful weapon that any advertising executive can possibly deploy, Idris Elba, because I'm not even joking. You want me to buy an expensive TV package, get Idris to ask, and I probably will. Drink? Better not, it's first thing in the morning and I'm trying to cut. Oh, why didn't you say so? Sure, load me up. Dark Tower? You're good, Idris, but you're not that good. No, today we are talking artifact weapons in World of Warcraft Legion, because if there is one thing that Legion is all about, it's those artifacts. Whether we're upgrading them, unlocking new appearances for them, upgrading them some more, every character you play has got one, and they are without doubt one of the expansion's main calling cards. And selling points too, because honestly, who wouldn't jump at the chance to wield legendary pieces of kit like the Doomhammer, or the motherfucking Ashbringer, or, you know, the Spear. Yes, the Spear! I love the Spear, load me up. By now, you might find it hard to imagine life without them, but here's the thing. Blizzard have already confirmed that our artifacts will not be following us into the next expansion. So however Legion ends, it will also be the end for the Doomhammer and the motherfucking Ashbringer, and I know you don't want to hear this, but the Spear as well. Which rather begs the question, what the fuck happens to our artifacts at the end of Legion? After all, they're not the kind of thing that we're just going to give up for the sake of it. They were uber powerful legendary items which were supposedly the most badass weapons in the world when we first won them at level 100, and since then they've just got bigger and badasser as we've plowed time and effort into them over the expansion. So whatever happens is going to have to be something big, and it also begs the question, what on earth could possibly replace them? It's going to feel a little bit shit going from the motherfucking Ashbringer to Kul'Tiras shitsword at level 111, and what if you've got one of those cool artifacts that keeps you company? If you're a shadow priest, you're going to lose your actual girlfriend, I mean your artifact friend who you talk to. Okay, so she mostly talks about how your pathetic world is going to be consumed by shadow, but look, I'm happy to take sultry voice companionship where I can find it, okay? And something tells me that Kul'Tiras shit knife isn't going to have quite the same level of conversation. Well, luckily, we've got some theories, so join us as we ask what will happen to our artifact weapons at the end of Legion and what will replace them, okay? Go, 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 go. To really understand what's going to happen to our artifacts and what's going to come next, we have to understand why we have them in the first place, and there are three reasons: sales, lore, and gameplay. The sales angle is pretty easy to understand. WoW needed a hit. Warlords of Draenor was generally considered to be a bit of a dud that even Blizzard essentially wrote off to focus on the next expansion, and if they were to stand any chance of reversing a downward spiral of sub-numbers, those devs were going to have to come up with something pretty special. A solid expansion with a regular and varied release schedule wasn't going to be enough. Legion needed the big guns. So we got Illidan Stormrage, playable demon hunters, a lore-rich and long-awaited location, and of course, the promise that if you just came back to the game, you too could finally wield weapons that had helped shape the very face and mythos of World of Warcraft. And the Spear. Okay, forget about the Spear. How about a Disco Bear? Yeah, I thought so. Oh, and they'll definitely sort out PvP this expansion too. That's a promise. Come back, please. Artifacts just about work from a lore perspective too. In the midst of the biggest Legion invasion of all time, and with our world under a scale of threat that it's never seen before, it makes sense that we would look to harness the might of the most powerful weapons in existence. As long as we don't think too much about why we've never bothered to hunt some of these bad boys down before when we face other world-ending threats. But I get it, the most dangerous threat ever needs the most epic weapons ever, I'm with you. But probably the most important reason for artifacts, and certainly the most innovative, is the gameplay elements that it introduces. Having one weapon equipped throughout the entire expansion allows Blizzard to introduce progression systems into the game which couldn't exist otherwise, an evolution they've been trying to get their heads around ever since the promised Path of the Titans was scrapped for Cataclysm. The idea that one way to keep all facets of endgame play interesting and relevant is to have what is essentially a limitless progression tree, where everything you do in-game, whether it be questing, dungeons, raids, or PvP, helps to advance that progression in some small way. If there's always a relevant reward for doing content, all that content which usually gets ignored at endgame will still be relevant, right? Now obviously the artifact power system isn't universally loved, and we'll touch on that later, but personally I believe that overall Blizzard nailed it with these weapons and this style of constant progression. It's engaging, it feels satisfying, and I am genuinely going to miss all of my artifacts when they're gone. So where are they going to go, and why? I like my artifact. I've put a lot of work into making my artifact as powerful and awesome as possible, and frankly, I'm not going to give up my artifact just because Thrall has decided he's done crying and wants his hammer back, you know? No, when we somehow lose our artifacts, it's not really going to be our choice, and it's going to have to be for a pretty important reason, a reason that's somehow worth giving up the 36 most powerful weapons on the planet. Now, of course, when we got our artifacts in the first place, each had its own quest line to complete, with its own story to enjoy, which made sense because these weapons have wildly varying origins and backgrounds, whether they be a bow carried by Aleria Windrunner herself, the sword that was wielded by the ruler of humankind, or an actual chunk of actual old god. These different stories needed to be told, and wanting to see these different stories for myself is one of the reasons that I now have 12 max level characters, thanks Blizz. And whereas there's a part of me that would like to think that at the end of all this there will be another 36 unique quest lines, and that every weapon will get its own unique goodbye. Maybe once the Legion has been defeated and its work done, we can lay the motherfucking Ashbringer with Tyrion. Perhaps Hattie meets another lightning wolf thing and decides to retire from a life of adventuring to start a family. I know this isn't really feasible, and I think it's fair to say that however they go, all classes will be losing their artifact the same way, in the same event, and for the same purpose, with one possible exception, which we'll get to later. One obvious such event would surely be a final boss battle. We know that at the end of Legion, we will be facing off against the world soul of Argus itself, and I still think there'll be a surprise extra helping of Sargeras thrown into that fight too, which as supermassive big bads go, is pretty massive and pretty bad. But the obvious assumption is that we will somehow have to combine the power of our artifacts to possibly stand the chance of defeating Sargeras and Argus, and that our weapons will be destroyed in the process, spent. However, this theory presents us with a number of practical problems. Firstly, if we destroy our weapons, say in an amazing cinematic at the end of a raid, then that's great, but the expansion doesn't end just because we completed the raid, does it? There's going to be at least a few months of waiting around for the next expansion, so I can't imagine that destroying our artifacts will be part of the action in the final raid, because we'd have the rather strange situation of destroying our artifacts every week on farm night, but then, you know, still having our artifacts. Yes, and I know that's not technically more stupid than the fact that we'll be killing the same magically alive enemies every week on different difficulty settings, but it feels weirder, okay? So I don't think that our weapons will be destroyed to defeat a boss, and I think that whatever causes it will either occur in the pre-patch to the next expansion, or as part of the beginning of 8.0 itself. But with the threat of Sargeras and the Burning Legion essentially over at the end of the Antorus raid, what could we possibly need to destroy our artifacts for? Well, there is the little matter of the planet of Argus up in the sky there. Maybe the planet becomes unstable and is about to blow up, and we somehow have to find a way to close the portal and zap it back to the other side of the universe. Illidan is busy by now, and the only way we could possibly conjure the amount of energy needed is with the powers of our artifacts combined, which obliterates them in the process. This seems a much more likely scenario, and kind of what I imagine Blizzard will go for, but there is another option that I can't quite get out of my mind. At this stage, we don't know what the next expansion will be, and whether it ends up being based around Kul'Tiras, Jaina, and Ashara, or something else entirely. One thing that we are definitely going to start seeing more of from now on is old gods and the void. The old gods are all about madness, whispers, and paranoia, about those you thought you could trust turning against you, about being driven insane with insecurities and second-guessing everything you thought you knew. And what if Blizz take that opportunity to do something really left field? What if, in the 8.0 pre-patch, our artifacts start whispering to us? What if, due to old god influence, we actually believe that our very weapons are turning against us and we have to dispose of them for our own safety? Having just used these super powerful artifacts to defeat the old god's most dangerous enemy in Sargeras, what if the old gods then managed to disarm us and make us think it was our idea? We think it's our artifacts corrupted by the void, but actually, it's us. It's an idea that was floated on Blizzard Watch's Lore Watch podcast a week or so ago, and I think it would be an awesome way to set up an expansion where you can never quite believe your own senses. If you can be so easily tricked into giving up your most powerful weapons at the start, how can you really trust that anything that happens to you after that isn't also Old God influenced. There is one outlier to all of this, because of course, if you're a Shadow Priest, your girlfriend, your dagger already is an Old God and already does whisper to you. Xal'atath is probably the most powerful of all the artifacts and definitely the most relevant to coming expansions. What if Xal'atath is the only weapon that does have its own unique storyline leading up to its departure from your character tab, that instead of being destroyed or lost like the others, it simply escapes? What if somewhere down the line in the next expansion, your Shadow Priest ends up facing off with the rest of your raid team against your old dagger, who is now a genuine bona fide raid boss? This I would pay good money to see. Make it happen, Blizz. So if artifacts are no more going into patch 8.0, what can replace them? Blizzard have a slight problem here, because whatever they do, unless they are very careful indeed, it's going to end up feeling like a massive letdown. We're used to upgrading and replacing our gear constantly throughout our time in World of Warcraft, but we've never carried one weapon around with us for an entire expansion and 10 levels before, working as hard to upgrade it as we have ourselves. These weapons mean more than whatever final boss drop we've replaced at the beginning of previous expansions. And not only that, but there is the gameplay issue too. A lot of how the game works now is based around artifacts, a never-ending progression system where nearly every action we complete in game helps us in our progression. And by and large, it's worked. It does feel like there are more types of content still relevant at endgame. It does feel like I'm being rewarded for every part of WoW that I play. And not only that, completing in-game milestones and achievements to unlock new appearances and color variations, that's something that I really enjoy, and something that has encouraged me to try different parts of the game. Like, I never used to PvP, but now I do because I wanted to get my prestige artifact skin and unlock the rated battleground variant on my Mage Tower appearance, which obviously I had to complete the Mage Tower to get in the first place, and by the way, that was also super fun. If there was an appearance that I could only get from doing pet battles, I would probably be doing pet battles too. So what I'm saying basically is, Blizzard, please, please, please don't make a pet battle artifact skin. I like the artifact system, and I think Blizzard do too, so I think it'll be staying. And with that in mind, the question is, what could possibly replace the Doomhammer or the motherfucking Ashbringer and retain the artifact system gameplay? Well, I don't think it's going to be artifact gloves or bracers, put it that way. I think we all learned our lesson there. Legendary weapons are cool. Legendary cloaks and rings are not. They are not cool. So it has to be another weapon. But what weapon could ever be as exciting as one made famous by some of the greatest lore characters in WoW? For me, there is only one answer. Next expansion, we need to see the introduction of our own crafted artifacts. What better way to replace the most legendary items in game than by forging our own that we will make legendary ourselves? My idea is this: at the beginning of the next expansion, we are invited to forge our own weapons to replace the ones that we just lost. These work like artifacts. They have a spec-specific talent tree and some variation of relics, and are upgraded through a system just like artifact power. That works, but we have customization options for how it looks at the start, possibly quite modest ones at first. Then we're able to unlock or loot or craft new visual elements or even whole new skins throughout the expansion, just like we can in Legion, but more so. Maybe players can craft visual elements or skins through professions that can be sold on the auction house. Maybe blacksmiths can craft different blades, leatherworkers hilts or fist weapons, jewelry crafters staffs. Bosses and challenges can drop specific color variations or skins or recipes. Over time, your weapon becomes a unique piece of gear which you yourself forged, leveled, and named. And yes, being able to name this shit is very important. There is no point having the greatest staff of all time if I don't get to call it Taliesin's lore, okay? That's basically my motivation behind all of this. So what do you think, guys? Would you go for a repeat of the artifact system that saw you craft your own weapon and turn it into a legend? Or are you totally done with the idea of artifacts now and can't wait to get back to having a new weapon that you loot every week? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to help keep them happening. These videos and the weekly resets would not exist without them. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Zaru. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.